The last ranch before. Nowhere. Nowhere. Elena Ward stood at the edge of Iron Creek Ranch with a starving child clinging to her skirt and nothing but silence as her defense. The town had already decided her guilt. The ranch hands wanted her gone. But when the giant rancher Jonah Hale stepped from the barn and saw little Tommy's hollow eyes, he did something no one expected. He opened the door. In a land where reputation is currency and mercy is weakness, one quiet woman, one frightened child, and one withdrawn man are about to prove that family isn't born from blood. It's forged in the fires of choice. If you're watching from anywhere in the world, drop your city in the comments below. I want to see how far Elena's story travels. Stay until the end, hit that like button, and let's walk this journey together. The prairie stretched endless under a July sun that had forgotten mercy. Heat shimmered off the hard pan in waves, bending the horizon into something liquid and uncertain. Elena Ward walked through it like a woman crossing the floor of hell, one foot placed carefully in front of the other, her worn boots kicking up small clouds of dust that settled back onto her faded calico dress. The satchel over her shoulder held everything she owned that mattered: a change of clothes for Tommy, a wooden spoon that had belonged to her mother, and $3 in coins wrapped in a handkerchief. Tommy walked beside her, his small hand gripped tight in hers. 5 years old, thin as a willow switch, with eyes too old for his face. He didn't complain about the heat or the distance or the blister forming on his heel. He'd learned early that complaining changed nothing. "How much further?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Elena looked ahead to where the land began to roll into gentle hills, where cottonwoods marked the presence of water. Not far now. She'd been saying that for 2 hours. Tommy nodded like he believed her. They'd been walking since dawn when the storekeeper in Blackwood had refused to sell them supplies and suggested, not unkindly but firmly, that they move along. Before that, it was Copper Ridge, where the boarding house owner took one look at Elena's face and said the rooms were full, though Elena could see empty beds through the window. Before that, Cedar Falls, where someone had recognized her name and the whispers started before she'd even stepped off the wagon. Elena Ward. That's her. The one who, she knew. Everyone knew, or thought they did. The truth was more complicated than the stories, but truth didn't travel as fast as rumor, and it certainly didn't burn as hot. So Elena had stopped trying to explain. She'd stopped defending herself. She just kept moving, kept Tommy close, and prayed each new town would be far enough from the last that her name meant nothing. Iron Creek was her last hope before the territories gave way to true wilderness. She'd heard about it from a freighter in Copper Ridge, a grizzled man who'd smelled of tobacco and spoken short, clipped sentences. "Ranch work," he'd said, eyeing her skeptically. "Jonah Hale runs a cattle operation 15 miles west of Blackwood. Keeps to himself. Hard man, but fair. Might take you on if you can work." "I can work," Elena had said. The freighter had shrugged. "Your funeral." Now as the ranch buildings came into view, a weathered 2-story house, a massive barn, corrals stretching out like geometric scars on the landscape, Elena felt her stomach tighten. This was it. The last ranch before nowhere. If Jonah Hale turned them away, there was nothing beyond but open country and the slow death that came from exposure and hunger. Tommy squeezed her hand. "Is that it?" "That's it. It's big." "Yes." "Will they let us stay?" Elena looked down at him, at the hope and fear warring in his thin face, and felt something crack inside her chest. "I don't know, sweetheart, but we're going to try." They crossed the last quarter mile in silence. As they approached, Elena could see men working in the corrals, 4, maybe 5 of them, moving cattle with practiced efficiency. The lowing of the animals mixed with the crack of whips and the low calls of the cowboys. No one noticed them at first. Then a dog barked. A big mongrel, part shepherd by the look of him, came bounding across the yard with his hackles raised. Tommy pressed against Elena's leg, and she put her hand on his shoulder, standing very still. "Easy," she said softly. "Easy, boy." The dog stopped 10 feet away, barking in sharp, aggressive bursts. One of the men in the corral turned, saw them, and called out, "Boss, visitors!" The work stopped. 5 faces turned toward them, weathered and suspicious. Elena felt their eyes like brands. From the barn emerged a 6th man, Jonah Hale. Even at a distance, he commanded attention. 6'4" if he was an inch, broad through the shoulders, with hands that looked like they could break a man's jaw without much effort. He wore work clothes, denim pants, a faded shirt, suspenders, a hat pulled low against the sun. His face was all hard planes and angles, carved from granite and sun and years of silence. A thick beard covered his jaw, more gray than black, and his eyes, pale blue, almost colorless, fixed on Elena with an intensity that made her want to step back. She held her ground. "Call off your dog, please," she said. Her voice was steady, though her heart hammered. Jonah studied her for a long moment, then whistled once, sharp and low. The dog immediately stopped barking and trotted back to his side, sitting obediently at his heel. Jonah walked forward, his boots crunching on the dry earth. He didn't hurry. When he stopped, he was close enough that Elena could see the scar that ran from his left eyebrow into his hairline, a pale line against tanned skin. "You lost?" His voice was deep, rough from disuse. "No, sir. I'm looking for work." His eyes flicked to Tommy, then back to her. "Ranch work's hard." "I can work hard." "You run cattle before?" "No, sir." "Rope, brand, break horses?" "No, sir." "Then what exactly can you do?" Elena felt the weight of every rejection pressing down on her shoulders. She thought about the boarding houses that turned them away, the stores that refused service, the endless walking with Tommy's hand in hers and nowhere safe to stop. She thought about the look in his eyes when he was hungry, the way he tried so hard not to be a burden. She met Jonah Hale's pale gaze and said the only thing that mattered. "I don't talk much, sir, but I can cook." Something shifted in his expression, not softening exactly, but a subtle change, like ice beginning to crack. His eyes moved to Tommy again, lingering on the boy's thin frame, the too large shirt, the worn-through soles of his boots. "The boy yours? He's mine to care for." "That's not what I asked." "It's the only answer that matters." Jonah's jaw worked beneath his beard. Behind him, the ranch hands had stopped pretending to work and were watching openly now. Elena could feel their judgment, their suspicion. She was used to it. "You got references?" Jonah asked. "No, sir." "Family?" "No, sir." "Where you coming from?" "East." "That's not specific." "No, sir." "It's not." Jonah's eyes narrowed. "You running from something?" Elena felt Tommy's fingers tighten around hers. She could lie. She could make up a story about a dead husband, a homestead lost to drought, any number of tragic but respectable circumstances. But she'd learned that lies had a way of catching up, and she was tired of running from her own words. "I'm running towards something," she said quietly. "A place where we can stop." "And you think that's here?" "I think this is the last place before nowhere." "So yes, sir. I hope it's here." Jonah stood silent for so long that Elena thought he might turn and walk away without another word. She braced herself for it, trying to figure out where they'd go, how far Tommy could walk before dark, whether there might be a cave or an overhang where they could sleep safely. Then Jonah looked down at Tommy and spoke directly to him for the first time. "You hungry, boy?" Tommy glanced up at Elena, uncertain. She nodded slightly. He looked back at Jonah and said very softly, "Yes, sir." "When's the last time you ate?" "Yesterday morning." Jonah's expression went very still. When he spoke again, his voice had an edge to it that made Elena's breath catch. "Yesterday morning." "Yes, sir." Jonah turned and walked toward the house without another word. Elena and Tommy stood frozen, unsure whether they'd been dismissed or invited. Then he stopped at the porch steps and looked back. "You coming or not?" Elena's throat tightened. She squeezed Tommy's hand and followed. The house was larger up close than it had seemed from the road. 2 stories, weathered but solid, with a wide porch that wrapped around the front and side. Jonah climbed the steps and pushed open the door, holding it as Elena and Tommy stepped inside. The interior was dark after the brilliant sunlight, and it took Elena's eyes a moment to adjust. When they did, she saw a large front room with furniture that had seen better days. A sofa with faded upholstery, 2 chairs, a stone fireplace blackened with use. Everything was clean but sparse, functional rather than comfortable. No curtains on the windows, no pictures on the walls, no sign that anyone lived here beyond the bare necessity of shelter. Jonah led them through to the kitchen at the back of the house. Here, at least, there was evidence of life. A large table dominated the center of the room, scarred and stained from years of use. A cast-iron stove stood against one wall, a pump and deep sink against another. Shelves lined with canned goods, sacks of flour and sugar, jars of preserves. A window looked out over the backyard where chickens scratched in the dirt. "Sit," Jonah said, gesturing to the table. Elena and Tommy sat. Jonah moved to the stove, his movements surprisingly efficient for a man his size. He stoked the fire, set a pan on the heat, sliced bread, brought out butter and jam, poured milk into 2 glasses. Within minutes, he set plates in front of them, bread toasted golden, butter melting into the warm surface, jam spread thick. Simple food, but to Tommy, it might as well have been a feast. He looked at Elena, asking permission with his eyes. "Go ahead, sweetheart," she said softly. Tommy ate like a child who'd learned not to waste, quickly but carefully, not dropping a crumb. Elena ate more slowly, watching Jonah as he leaned against the counter, arms crossed over his chest, studying them with those pale, unreadable eyes. "You got a name?" he asked. "Elena Ward." "This is Tommy." "Tommy Ward?" "Just Tommy." Jonah nodded slowly. "I'm Jonah Hale. This is my ranch." "Yes, sir. I know. How'd you hear about it?" "Man in Copper Ridge mentioned you might need help." "What man?" "Freighter. Didn't give his name." "What did he say about me?" Elena met his gaze. "Said you were hard but fair." "Hard's accurate, fair's debatable." He paused. "You know how to cook for 15 men?" Elena's heart jumped. "How many right now?" 6, including me. But come fall, we'll have a full crew." "I can manage 15. 3 meals a day. Breakfast before dawn, lunch at noon, dinner at sundown. No complaints, no excuses." "Yes, sir." "You'll have room and board. Separate quarters in the bunkhouse. $1 a day in wages." It was less than she'd hoped, but more than she'd expected. "That's generous." "It's what the work's worth." Jonah pushed off the counter. "You start tomorrow, dawn. I'll show you the kitchen supplies tonight so you know what you're working with." "Thank you, sir." "Don't thank me yet. You might not last the week." He looked at Tommy, who'd finished eating and was trying very hard not to stare at the remaining bread on the counter. "Boy needs clothes, boots. I'll advance you against wages." "That's not necessary." "Yes, it is. Can't have him running around in rags. Looks bad." Jonah's tone was gruff, but Elena caught something beneath it. Not kindness exactly, but a rough approximation of it. "You can use the wash house out back to clean up. I'll have one of the men show you to your quarters." He moved toward the door, then stopped. "Miss Ward?" "Yes, sir?" "I don't care where you came from or what you're running from, but if you bring trouble to my ranch, you'll be gone before sundown. Understood?" Elena nodded. "Understood." "Good." He settled his hat on his head. "Welcome to Iron Creek." Then he was gone, the door closing behind him with a soft click. Elena sat very still, hardly daring to believe what had just happened. Tommy looked up at her, milk on his upper lip, his eyes wide. "We can stay?" he whispered. She pulled him close, pressing her face into his hair. "We can stay." For now, she didn't say. For now. The quarters Jonah provided were better than Elena expected. A small room attached to the back of the bunkhouse, separate from where the ranch hands slept. It had a bed, a dresser, a washstand, and a window that looked out toward the mountains. Someone had swept recently. The floor was clean, the mattress aired out. Simple, but private. "It's nice," Tommy said, exploring the room with careful steps. "It is." Elena set down her satchel and looked around, trying to memorize the feeling of walls around her, a roof overhead, a door she could close. Safety. Temporary, maybe, but real. A knock at the door made her turn. A young man stood in the doorway, maybe 20, with sandy hair and an easy smile. He held a bundle of clothes. "Ma'am, name's Charlie Mason. Boss sent these for the boy." He held out the bundle, a shirt, pants, and a pair of small boots. They're old, but they're clean. Belong to, well, they've been sitting in storage a while. Elena took them, feeling the worn softness of the fabric. "Thank you, Mr. Mason." "Just Charlie's fine." He shifted his weight, suddenly awkward. "Look, ma'am, I don't mean to pry, but the other men, they're going to ask questions. Might be easier if you had answers ready." "What kind of questions?" "Where you're from, why you're here, whether you got a husband somewhere who might show up looking for you." Elena's hands tightened on the clothes. "I don't have a husband." "Figured the boy is mine to care for. That's all anyone needs to know." Charlie nodded slowly. "Fair enough. But ma'am, ranch life's hard enough without secrets. Men talk, they speculate. Sometimes that speculation gets mean." "I can handle mean, Mr. Mason." "I don't doubt it." He tipped his hat. "Supper's at sundown. You're welcome to eat with the crew in the bunkhouse, or I can bring you a plate if you'd rather." Elena considered. Hiding would only fuel speculation, and she was tired of hiding. "We'll eat with the crew." "Yes, ma'am." Charlie started to leave, then paused. "For what it's worth, boss doesn't usually take on strays. In fact, he gave you a job means something. Don't know what, but something." After he left, Elena helped Tommy into his new clothes. The shirt was too big, the pants needed rolling at the cuff, but the boots fit well enough. He looked like a different child. Still thin, still too serious for his age, but less like a ghost. "Do I look okay?" he asked. "You look handsome." He smiled, small and uncertain. It broke her heart every time. They walked to the bunkhouse at sundown. The building was long and low, with bunks lining both walls and a large table in the center where the crew gathered for meals. 6 men looked up when Elena entered, 5 she hadn't met, plus Charlie, who nodded at her reassuringly. Jonah sat at the head of the table, already eating. He glanced at them, gestured to 2 empty seats, and went back to his food. The man who'd cooked, a grizzled cowboy with a limp and tobacco-stained teeth, slapped plates down in front of them. Beans, salt pork, biscuits hard as rocks. Elena had eaten worse. Tommy ate carefully, trying not to make noise. The men watched them with varying degrees of curiosity and suspicion. Finally, one of them, a stocky man with a scar across his knuckles, spoke up. "So, you're the new cook?" "Yes, sir." "Can you actually cook, or are you just desperate for work?" Elena met his eyes. "Both." A couple of the men chuckled. The stocky man didn't smile. "Name's Garrett. I run the crew under boss. You got questions about ranch work, you ask me. You got problems with the men, you bring them to me. Clear?" "Clear." Another man, younger, with a nervous energy about him, leaned forward. "Where you from, Miss Ward?" "East." "Where east?" "Does it matter?" "Might." Jonah's fork hit his plate with a sharp clink. Every man at the table went quiet. "It doesn't matter," Jonah said, his voice flat. "She's here to cook. That's all you need to know." The younger man flushed but didn't argue. They finished the meal in silence. Afterward, as Elena was clearing plates, Garrett approached her. Up close, he smelled like leather and sweat, and his eyes were hard. "Listen," he said, low enough that the others couldn't hear. "I don't know what your story is, and I don't care. But if you bring trouble here, law trouble, husband trouble, any kind of trouble, it's my job to protect this ranch and these men. You understand what I'm saying?" "I understand." "Good." He stepped back. "Breakfast at 5. Don't be late." That night, lying in the narrow bed with Tommy curled against her side, Elena stared at the ceiling and listened to the sounds of the ranch settling for the night. Horses in the corral. The distant yip of coyotes. Men's voices from the bunkhouse, low and indistinct. "Elena?" Tommy whispered. "Yes, sweetheart? Are we safe here?" She thought about Jonah's warning, about Garrett's suspicion, about the way the men looked at her like a problem waiting to happen. "I think so," she said. "For now." "How long is for now?" "I don't know." Tommy was quiet for a moment, then, "I like it here." Elena closed her eyes. Me too. She hoped it would be enough. Bob. Elena woke before dawn, dressed quickly, and left Tommy sleeping while she made her way to the main house. The kitchen was dark and cold. She lit lamps, stoked the stove, and began taking inventory of what she had to work with. Flour, cornmeal, salt pork, dried beans, potatoes in a root cellar, eggs from the chickens, milk from the small dairy herd. Basic supplies, but good quality. She could work with this. By the time the men started filing in at 5, she had coffee boiling, bacon frying, biscuits in the oven, and eggs ready to scramble. The smell filled the kitchen, rich and savory and welcoming. Jonah was first through the door. He stopped, inhaling deeply, and something that might have been approval crossed his face. "Smells good." "Thank you, sir." The other men followed, filling the kitchen with noise and movement. Elena served them efficiently, hot food, strong coffee, plenty of it. They ate without complaint, and when Garrett scraped his plate clean and reached for seconds, she knew she'd passed the first test. After breakfast, while the men headed out to work, Jonah lingered. "You did fine," he said. "I'm just getting started." "Still, it's been a while since this kitchen saw a decent meal." He paused. "The boy, Tommy, he gonna be underfoot?" Elena felt her spine stiffen. "He'll stay out of the way." "Didn't say he had to, just asking." Jonah picked up his hat from the hook by the door. "Ranch has chores that need doing. Light work, collecting eggs, feeding chickens. Might keep him busy." It took Elena a moment to understand. He wasn't complaining about Tommy's presence. He was offering the boy purpose. "That's kind of you." Jonah shrugged. "Keeps him from getting bored. Bored kids find trouble." "He's not a troublesome child." "Didn't say he was." Jonah settled his hat. "Garrett's taking the crew to the north pasture today. I'll be in the barn if you need anything." He left before she could respond. Elena stood in the warm kitchen, surrounded by the evidence of her work: clean plates, empty pans, the lingering smell of coffee and bacon, and felt something unfamiliar stirring in her chest. Not quite hope. Not yet. But maybe the beginning of it. The days developed a rhythm. Elena woke before dawn, prepared breakfast, cleaned the kitchen, started preparations for lunch. Tommy helped where he could, fetching water, collecting eggs, sweeping floors. He was careful and quiet, always trying to earn his keep. The men grew accustomed to her presence. They still watched her, still speculated when they thought she couldn't hear, but the food was good and plentiful, and that bought a measure of acceptance. All except Garrett. He wasn't cruel exactly, but he watched Elena like a man waiting for a shoe to drop. Every morning he'd inspect the kitchen, looking for some fault. Every evening he'd count supplies, making sure nothing was missing. He questioned her about everything: where she learned to cook, why she seasoned the beans a certain way, whether she was using too much salt. Charlie noticed. "Don't take it personal," he said one afternoon while helping her carry supplies from the root cellar. "Garrett's protective of this place. Lost the last ranch he worked to some bad decisions. Makes him suspicious." "I'm not making bad decisions. I know that, but he doesn't trust easy." Charlie set down a sack of potatoes. "Give him time." But time was exactly what Elena wasn't sure she had. The first hint of trouble came a week into her employment, when she needed supplies from town. Jonah gave her a list, money from the ranch account, and directions to Blackwood. "Take the wagon," he said. "Charlie'll drive you." Blackwood was bigger than the towns Elena had passed through. A proper main street with a general store, a saloon, a bank, a church. People moved along the boardwalks with purpose. Elena kept her head down as Charlie helped her from the wagon. The general store was crowded. Elena waited her turn, then presented her list to the clerk, a thin man with spectacles and suspicious eyes. He read the list, looked at her, then read it again. "This is for Iron Creek Ranch?" "Yes, sir." "Jonah sent you?" "He did." The clerk's mouth pressed into a thin line. "I'll need to verify that." "The money's right here." "I'll need to verify it," he repeated, louder. The store went quiet. Elena felt eyes turning toward her, measuring her, judging her. Charlie stepped forward. "There a problem, Mr. Hutchins?" "Just being careful, Charlie." "Can't be too careful these days." "Careful about what?" But Hutchins didn't answer. He disappeared into a back room, leaving Elena standing at the counter with her list and her money, feeling the weight of every stare. When Hutchins returned, he had another man with him, tall, well-dressed, with the bearing of someone used to authority. "Miss Ward," the man said, "I'm Samuel Merrick. I own the bank here, and I serve on the town council." Elena's throat tightened. "Mr. Merrick, Mr. Hutchins tells me you're purchasing supplies for Iron Creek Ranch. That's correct? On whose authority?" "Mr. Hale's." "I see." Merrick's eyes were cold. "And how long have you been employed at Iron Creek?" "A week. A week." He exchanged glances with Hutchins. "Mr. Hutchins, do you know this woman?" "No, sir." "Have you seen her in town before?" "No, sir." "Interesting." Merrick turned back to Elena. "Where are you from, Miss Ward?" Elena's hands clenched around her list. She could feel the trap closing. "I don't see how that's relevant to purchasing supplies." "It's relevant because this is a respectable town, and we have standards about who we do business with." "The ranch account is good," Charlie interjected. "We've been doing business here for years." "The ranch account is fine," Merrick cut him off. "It's the woman I'm concerned about." The words hung in the air like smoke. Elena forced herself to breathe. "If there's a problem, I can come back with Mr. Hale." "That won't be necessary." Merrick smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Mr. Hutchins will fill your order. But Miss Ward, I'd suggest you be mindful of the company you keep. Blackwood is a small town. We look out for each other, and we remember." It was a warning, clear as a gunshot. Elena took her supplies, paid, and walked out with Charlie trailing behind her. Her hands shook as she climbed into the wagon. "Miss Ward," Charlie started. "Don't," she said quietly. "Please, just drive." They rode back to the ranch in silence. When they arrived, Jonah was waiting in the yard. One look at Elena's face and his expression hardened. "What happened?" "Nothing," Elena said. "Charlie?" The young cowboy shifted uncomfortably. "Merrick gave her trouble. Nothing specific, just making it clear she wasn't welcome." Jonah's jaw tightened. "What did he say?" "That Blackwood has standards," Elena said, climbing down from the wagon. "That they remember things." "Remember what?" "Whatever they've heard." She met his eyes. "I told you I came from East. I didn't tell you why I left. You don't owe me explanations." "Maybe I do, if it's going to cause problems for your ranch." Jonah was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Unload the wagon, Charlie." "Boss, now." Charlie obeyed. Jonah gestured for Elena to follow him. They walked to the barn, into the cool dimness that smelled of hay and horse and leather. He closed the door, giving them privacy. "Talk," he said. Elena took a breath. This was it, the moment where it all came apart. 2 years ago, I lived in a town called Harper's Ferry. I worked as a seamstress. I had a good reputation, a quiet life. She paused, gathering herself. There was a fire, a bad one. It started in the boarding house where I lived. 4 people died. Jonah's expression didn't change. "You said it?" "No." Her voice was firm. "But I was blamed for it." "Why?" "Because I was the only one who survived from the top floor. Because I couldn't explain how I made it out when others didn't. Because—" She swallowed hard. "Because the boarding house owner's son had been courting me. I'd refused him. He told people I'd threatened him, that I was unstable. When the fire happened, he said I must have started it in revenge." "Did you?" "No." Elena looked Jonah straight in the eye. "I woke up to smoke. I crawled to the window. I got out. That's all I did. But by the time the fire was out and the bodies were counted, the story was already written. The rejected woman, the vengeful spinster, the murderer." "They arrest you?" "No, there wasn't enough evidence, but there didn't need to be. The town decided. I lost my work, my reputation, my home." She paused. "And then I found Tommy." "Where?" "In the ruins. The morning after. He was hiding in a root cellar, crying for his mother. She'd been one of the 4 who died." Elena's voice cracked slightly. "He had no one. The town was going to send him to an orphanage. I couldn't. I took him. I left. We've been moving ever since." Jonah absorbed this in silence. When he spoke, his voice was measured. So you're not running from the law? No. You're running from gossip. I'm running from being hanged in the court of public opinion while a frightened child watches. Jonah nodded slowly. And now Merrick knows you're here. Yes. Which means the whole town will know by tomorrow. Yes. And if they've heard the stories from back east, they'll decide you're dangerous. Elena felt tears threatening but refused to let them fall. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have come here. I'll pack our things. No. She looked up, startled. Sir? I said no. Jonah's pale eyes were hard as flint. You work for me. You cook good food. You keep the kitchen clean. The boy stays out of trouble. That's all I care about. But if the town doesn't run my ranch. His voice was flat, final. You stay until I say otherwise. Clear? Elena stared at him, hardly daring to believe. You're sure? I don't say things I don't mean. He walked to the barn door, then stopped. Miss Ward. Yes, sir? I've lived long enough to know that what people say about you and what's actually true are usually two different things. I'll judge you by what I see, not by what I hear. Thank you, she whispered. He nodded once and left. Elena stood alone in the barn, shaking with relief and residual fear. Outside, she could hear Tommy's voice, laughing at something Charlie said. The sound was so rare, so precious, that it nearly broke her. They could stay. For now, they could stay. But as she walked back toward the house, Elena couldn't shake the feeling that Merrick's warning was only the beginning. And she was right. The trouble started small, the way most trouble does on the frontier. Quiet whispers that grew into louder conversations, suspicions that hardened into certainties nobody bothered to verify. 3 days after the incident in Blackwood, Elena noticed the first change. The milk delivery that usually came twice a week arrived a day late, and when it did, the dairy farmer, a stooped man named Hendricks, who'd always nodded politely, wouldn't meet her eyes as he unloaded the cans. Mr. Hendricks, Elena said, stepping onto the porch. Is everything all right? He flinched like she'd struck him. Fine, ma'am, just running behind. The milk seems soured. It's fresh as of yesterday morning. Elena lifted the lid on one of the cans and caught the unmistakable tang of milk gone bad. This isn't fresh. Hendricks' face reddened. Are you calling me a liar? I'm saying the milk is spoiled. Then don't buy it. He climbed back onto his wagon, gathering the reins with shaking hands. Plenty of other ranches need dairy, Mr. Hendricks. But he'd already snapped the reins and the wagon lurched away, leaving Elena standing on the porch with 2 cans of unusable milk and a cold knot forming in her stomach. That evening, when she mentioned it to Jonah, he listened without interruption, then went to the barn and came back with a ledger. He ran his finger down a column of numbers. Hendricks has been delivering to Iron Creek for 6 years, he said. Never a late delivery, never spoiled product. I'm sorry, Elena said quietly. This is because of me. Jonah closed the ledger with a snap. This is because Hendricks is a coward who listens to gossip. He stood, reaching for his hat. I'll handle it. You don't have to. Yes, I do. His tone left no room for argument. This is my ranch, my account, my decision, who works here. Hendricks needs reminding of that. He returned 2 hours later without explanation, but the next milk delivery arrived on time, fresh, with an extra can thrown in at no charge. Hendricks still wouldn't look at Elena, but the milk was good. The pattern repeated itself with mounting frequency. The blacksmith in town who'd always repaired ranch tools promptly suddenly had a 2-week backlog. The seamstress who took in mending claimed she was too busy to accept new work. When Charlie went to town for horseshoe nails, the stable owner charged him double the usual price and suggested maybe Iron Creek should find a new supplier. They're closing ranks, Charlie said one evening, helping Elena carry water from the pump. Merrick's been talking, spreading stories, getting people worked up. What kind of stories? Charlie's expression darkened. That you're dangerous, that you burned down a boarding house back east, that you kidnapped Tommy from his rightful family. He paused. That Jonah's a fool for keeping you on. Elena's hands tightened on the bucket handle. None of that is true. I know that. But truth doesn't matter much when people want to believe the worst. He set down his bucket and looked at her directly. Miss Ward, I've been thinking, maybe it'd be safer if you and Tommy moved on, found someplace where nobody knows your name. You want me gone too? No, he said quickly, but I don't want to see you hurt, or Tommy hurt, and the way things are heading, he trailed off, shaking his head. Just be careful. That night, lying in bed with Tommy's small body curled against her side, Elena stared at the ceiling and wondered how long Jonah's protection could hold against an entire town's animosity. She'd seen this before. The slow buildup, the gathering storm. In Harper's Ferry, it had taken 3 months for whispers to become accusations. Here, it had taken 3 days. The acceleration terrified her. Tommy stirred in his sleep, making a small sound of distress. Elena pulled him closer, stroking his hair until he settled. He was putting on weight now, his face filling out, his eyes less haunted. He laughed more, played with the ranch dog, took pride in collecting eggs each morning and presenting them to Elena like treasure. For the first time since the fire, he was acting like a child instead of a survivor. Elena couldn't bear the thought of ripping that away from him. But she also couldn't bear the thought of staying if it meant bringing harm to the ranch that had sheltered them. She was still wrestling with the decision when morning came, cold and gray, with thunder rumbling in the distance. She rose, dressed, and made her way to the kitchen through air that tasted like copper and rain. The men came in for breakfast subdued and tense. Ranch work didn't stop for weather, but nobody liked working cattle in a lightning storm. Jonah gave terse instructions about moving the herd to lower ground, and the crew headed out with rain slickers and grim expressions. Elena spent the morning preparing extra food. They'd be soaked and exhausted when they returned. She made beef stew, thick with potatoes and carrots, fresh bread, apple pie with the last of the preserved fruit, work that kept her hands busy and her mind occupied. Tommy sat at the kitchen table practicing his letters on a slate Charlie had given him. He was a quick learner, hungry for knowledge the way he'd once been hungry for food. Elena glanced at him periodically, memorizing the sight, the way his tongue poked out when he concentrated, the careful formation of each letter, the quiet contentment on his face. The storm hit around noon with violent force. Rain lashed the windows. Wind howled around the eaves. Thunder cracked so loud it rattled the dishes in their cupboards. And then, through the chaos of the storm, Elena heard shouting. She ran to the window and saw Garrett and 2 other hands sprinting toward the barn, their faces tight with alarm. Something was wrong. Elena told Tommy to stay inside, then threw a shawl over her head and ran across the yard. Rain soaked through her dress in seconds. She reached the barn just as Garrett emerged, leading a limping horse. "What happened?" she called over the storm. "Fence broke in the north pasture," Garrett shouted back. "Lightning strike. Cattle scattered. Jonah and Charlie are trying to round them up, but Charlie's horse threw him. Might have broken his arm." "Where is he?" "Still out there. Jonah won't leave the herd." Elena's mind raced. "Can you ride out with help?" "Not in this. Lightning's too close. We'd be sitting targets." Garrett's jaw was tight with frustration. "We wait for the storm to pass." But waiting meant Jonah and Charlie were trapped in open country, exposed to lightning and flash floods and a dozen other dangers. Elena looked toward the north pasture, obscured by sheets of rain, and felt her stomach clench. She ran back to the house, checking on Tommy, still safe at the table, eyes wide with worry, then returned to her work because there was nothing else she could do. She prepared coffee, strong and hot, laid out dry clothes, stoked the fire high so the men would have warmth when they came in, if they came in. The storm raged for 2 hours. When it finally broke, the clouds lifting like a curtain being drawn back, Garrett and 3 hands immediately saddled fresh horses and rode north. Elena stood on the porch, watching them disappear, her hands clasped so tight her knuckles ached. Tommy came to stand beside her. "Will they be okay?" "Yes," Elena said, because what else could she say? They waited. The sun came out, weak and watery. Steam rose from the wet earth. And then, finally, riders appeared on the horizon. Garrett led the way, grim-faced. Behind him came 2 hands supporting Charlie between them, his face pale and his left arm held at an awkward angle. And at the rear, alone on his big bay gelding, came Jonah. He was soaked through, covered in mud, blood seeping through a tear in his shirt sleeve. But he was upright, alive. Elena felt something loosen in her chest. They brought Charlie straight to the house. Elena cleared the kitchen table, laying down clean towels while Garrett carefully helped the young cowboy down. Charlie's teeth were clenched against pain, but he managed a weak smile. "Told you ranch work was exciting," he said. "Hush." Elena examined his arm gently. The bone wasn't protruding, but the swelling and unnatural angle told her all she needed to know. "It's broken. Needs setting." "I'll ride for the doctor," one of the hands said. "Storm washed out the bridge," Garrett replied. "Won't be passable until tomorrow at the earliest." Elena looked at Jonah, who stood dripping in the doorway. "Can you set a bone?" "Done it before." He moved forward, rolling up his sleeves. "Charlie, you got something to bite down on?" They gave him a leather strap. What followed was brutal and efficient. Jonah's big hands, sure and steady, as he manipulated the bone back into alignment, while Charlie made sounds that would haunt Elena's dreams. When it was done, they splinted the arm with boards and strips of torn sheet, and Elena dosed Charlie with laudanum from the medicine chest. "He needs rest," she said. "He can stay in my room. I'll sleep in the chair." "You don't have to," Charlie started. "Yes, I do. Doctor's orders." She managed a small smile. "Unofficial doctor, but still." They moved Charlie to the bed, got him settled. Within minutes, the laudanum pulled him under. Elena covered him with a blanket and stepped back into the kitchen where Jonah still stood, swaying slightly. "Your turn," she said. "I'm fine." "You're bleeding. Sit." For a moment she thought he'd refuse. Then he pulled out a chair and sat heavily, exhaustion written in every line of his body. Elena brought hot water, clean cloths, and the medicine chest. She pushed back his torn sleeve and examined the gash on his forearm. Deep, but clean, probably from barbed wire. "This needs stitching," she said. "I'll do it later." "You'll do it now." Elena threaded a needle with steady hands. "Unless you want it to fester." Jonah watched her face as she worked, his expression unreadable. She cleaned the wound, then began stitching, her movements careful and precise. He didn't flinch, didn't make a sound, just sat there like a statue while she worked. "Where'd you learn to do that?" he asked finally. "My mother was a midwife. She taught me basic doctoring." Elena tied off the thread, cut it, and bandaged the wound. "There. Keep it clean and dry." "Yes, ma'am." There was something almost amused in his tone. Elena began cleaning up the medical supplies, suddenly aware of how close they were, how the kitchen felt smaller with just the two of them in it. She could smell rain and mud and sweat, and underneath that something else, leather and wood smoke and the particular scent that was just Jonah. "You did good today," he said quietly, keeping calm, knowing what to do. "I didn't do anything. You did exactly what needed doing." He stood, wincing slightly. "That's more than most people manage in a crisis." Before Elena could respond, the door burst open and Garrett strode in, his expression thunderous. "Boss, we got a problem." Jonah straightened. "What kind?" "3 steers dead in the north pasture. At first I thought it was the lightning, but..." Garrett's jaw worked. "Someone cut the fence. The break wasn't from the storm. It was deliberate." The kitchen went very still. "You're certain?" Jonah's voice was dangerously quiet. "Saw the wire myself, clean cuts. And that's not all." Garrett pulled something from his pocket and slammed it on the table. "Found this nailed to a fence post." It was a piece of paper, rain-spotted, but still readable. Elena's blood turned to ice as she read the words scrawled in rough handwriting, "Get rid of the woman or lose more than cattle." Jonah picked up the paper, his face like granite. "When?" "Had to be during the storm. Everyone was accounted for except..." Garrett's eyes cut to Elena. "Except her." "I was in the kitchen," Elena said quickly. "Tommy was with me the whole time." "Convenient." "Garrett." Jonah's tone held warning. "Boss, think about it. She shows up out of nowhere. Within a week, we've got spoiled milk, overcharged supplies, and now sabotage. Maybe she's not doing it herself, but she's the reason it's happening. That's not her fault. Doesn't matter whose fault it is. It's happening." Garrett stepped forward, his voice hard. I've been patient, given her a chance, but I've got men to protect and a ranch to run. That note's a threat, a direct threat. And every day she stays here, we're in more danger. Elena felt the words like blows. I never meant, your intentions don't matter, Garrett cut her off. Results matter. And the result is we're under attack. We don't know who wrote this, Jonah said. Don't we? Garrett's laugh was bitter. Merrick's been stirring up trouble since the day she went to town. Half of Blackwood thinks she's a murderer. The other half thinks Jonah's lost his mind for keeping her. Someone decided to make their feelings known. By killing my cattle and threatening my people. Jonah's eyes were ice. That's a crime, Garrett, a serious one. Then report it to the sheriff. And say what? That someone in town doesn't like my hiring decisions? Say that you're being targeted because of her. Garrett pointed at Elena. Say that keeping her here is putting all of us at risk. Say that maybe, just maybe, it's time to make the smart choice instead of the stubborn one. Jonah's hand curled into a fist on the table. For a moment, Elena thought he might hit Garrett. Instead, he spoke with forced calm. Get out. Boss, I said get out. Take your opinions and your threats and get the hell out of my kitchen. Garrett's face darkened. You're making a mistake. That's my right. This is my ranch, and we're your crew. Doesn't our safety matter? Your safety matters. Your fear doesn't. Jonah stood, using his height to full advantage. I hired Miss Ward because she can cook and she needed work. Those reasons haven't changed. Neither has my decision. If you can't live with that, there's the door. The two men stared at each other, tension crackling like the lightning that had recently passed. Finally, Garrett shook his head. You're a good man, Jonah, but you're being a fool. He turned and walked out, slamming the door behind him. In the silence that followed, Elena realized she was shaking. She sank into a chair, her legs suddenly unreliable. I'm sorry, she whispered. He's right. I should go. He's not right. Jonah was still standing, still radiating controlled fury. He's scared. Scared men say stupid things. But the note proves someone's angry enough to commit vandalism and make threats. It doesn't prove they're right. He looked at her, his pale eyes searching her face. Unless you want to leave. I don't want to, but I don't want anyone hurt because of me. Too late for that? Jonah gestured to the note still lying on the table. This isn't about you anymore. It's about whether I let fear and intimidation dictate how I run my ranch. And I don't. Elena looked up at him, this hard, stubborn man who'd given her shelter when no one else would. Why are you doing this? Why defend me? Jonah was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough but honest. Because I know what it's like to be judged for something that wasn't your fault. To have a whole town decide who you are based on rumors and assumptions. He paused. And because that boy in there deserves better than to be driven away by a mob that's too cowardly to check their facts. What happened to you? Elena asked softly. What did they judge you for? Jonah's expression closed like a door slamming shut. That's a conversation for another time. He moved toward the door, then stopped. Lock up tonight. Keep Tommy close. And if anything seems wrong, anything at all, you find me. Understood? Understood. After he left, Elena sat alone in the darkening kitchen, the note still on the table in front of her. She read it again, feeling the hatred behind the words, the promise of violence. Get rid of the woman or lose more than cattle. She thought about leaving, taking Tommy and disappearing in the night before anyone else got hurt. But where would they go? They'd tried running. It never worked. The rumors always caught up, and they always had to run again. Maybe Jonah was right. Maybe the time for running was over. Maybe it was time to stand and fight. Elena stood, went to check on Charlie, still sleeping peacefully, then walked to the small room where Tommy was already in bed, the dog curled at his feet. Elena, he said sleepily, is Mr. Charlie going to be okay? He's going to be fine. And Mr. Jonah? He's fine too. Tommy was quiet for a moment, then, are we leaving? The question hit Elena like a physical blow. Why would you think that? Because we always leave. His voice was small, matter of fact. When people get angry, we leave. Elena sat on the edge of the bed, taking his hand. Not this time. Why not? Because Mr. Jonah says we can stay, and because I'm tired of running. Me too, Tommy whispered. He squeezed her hand. I like it here. I know, sweetheart. I do too. She stayed with him until he fell asleep, then returned to the kitchen to finish cleaning up. Through the window, she could see lantern light in the bunkhouse, could hear the low murmur of voices, the crew talking, deciding, choosing sides. Tomorrow would tell whether Jonah's defense would be enough, or whether the storm that had passed overhead was just a preview of the real tempest to come. Elena locked the doors, checked the windows, and finally allowed herself to sink into the chair by Charlie's bedside. She didn't sleep. She listened to the night sounds, wind in the eaves, horses moving in the corral, the creak of old wood settling. And somewhere out there, in the darkness beyond the ranch, someone who wanted her gone badly enough to kill for it. Elena thought about the fire in Harper's Ferry, the accusations, the way a lie, repeated often enough, became truth in people's minds. She'd run from it once, and it had followed her like a shadow. Not this time. This time she would face it head on. Whatever came next, she would be ready. Dawn came pale and hesitant, as if uncertain whether it was welcome. Elena had dozed fitfully in the chair, jerking awake at every small sound, her body tense and ready for trouble that hadn't yet arrived. When the first gray light filtered through the window, she rose stiffly and checked on Charlie, still sleeping, his breathing even, before making her way to the kitchen. The house was silent. Outside, she could hear the ranch beginning to stir, men's voices low and careful, the clang of metal on metal from the barn, normal sounds that felt anything but normal. Elena built up the fire and started coffee, her hands moving through familiar motions while her mind churned. She was mixing biscuit dough when she heard boots on the porch, heavy, deliberate steps. She braced herself, but it was only Jonah who pushed through the door, his hat in his hands. "Morning?" he said. "Morning." Elena didn't turn from her work. "Coffee's ready." He poured himself a cup, leaned against the counter, and watched her work in silence. The quiet stretched between them, not uncomfortable exactly, but weighted with unspoken things. Finally, Jonah said, "Garrett left last night." Elena's hands stilled in the dough. "Left?" "Took his pay and rode out around midnight. Said he couldn't work for a man who valued a stranger over his crew's safety." Jonah's voice was flat, emotionless. Two other hands went with him. "I'm sorry." "Don't be. If they can't trust my judgment, I don't want them here." He set down his cup. "But it puts us short-handed. We've got 3 men now, counting Charlie, who can't work for at least a month. What will you do?" "Hire new hands when I can find them. Work harder until then." He paused. "Question is, what will you do?" Elena met his eyes. "I'm staying, if you'll have me." Something shifted in Jonah's expression, not quite approval, but close. "Then we're agreed. But things are going to get harder before they get easier. That note wasn't an idle threat." "I know." "Good." He picked up his hat. "Breakfast in an hour?" "Yes, sir." After he left, Elena returned to her work, but her mind was already racing ahead, planning. If they were going to weather this storm, they needed to be smart, careful, ready for whatever came next. The remaining crew came in for breakfast subdued and watchful. Besides Jonah, there was Charlie, propped up at the table with his arm in a sling, pale but determined, and 2 other hands Elena had come to know over the past weeks. Davis, a quiet man in his 40s with kind eyes and a gentle way with horses. And Miguel, barely 20, who'd come north from Texas and still carried the soft accent of the border country in his speech. They ate without much conversation. When they'd finished, Jonah pushed back his plate and addressed them directly. "You all know what happened yesterday? You know Garrett left and why. I'm not going to pretend this isn't a difficult situation, but I'm also not going to apologize for my decisions." He looked at each man in turn. "If any of you want to leave, now's the time. No hard feelings. I'll give you fair pay and good references." Davis shook his head immediately. "I'm staying, boss. Garrett was wrong to leave like that." Miguel nodded. "Me too. This is good work, good place. I don't run because of threats." Charlie tried to straighten in his chair and winced. "You know I'm staying. Besides, someone's got to make sure Miss Ward doesn't poison your coffee, now that Garrett's not here to taste it first." The weak joke broke some of the tension. Even Jonah's mouth twitched slightly. "All right then," he said. "We work. We watch. And we don't give whoever wrote that note the satisfaction of seeing us scared." The men dispersed to their tasks, leaving Elena alone with the breakfast dishes. She was scrubbing a pan when Tommy appeared in the doorway, rubbing sleep from his eyes. "Is it true Mr. Garrett's gone?" he asked. Word traveled fast, even to small ears. "Yes, sweetheart." "Because of us?" Elena dried her hands and knelt down to his level. "Mr. Garrett left because he was afraid. But being afraid doesn't give you the right to be cruel. Remember that." Tommy nodded solemnly. "I remember." He paused. "Are we safe here?" It was the question Elena had been asking herself all night. She wanted to lie, to offer empty reassurances. But Tommy deserved better than that. "I don't know," she said honestly. "But Mr. Jonah is doing everything he can to keep us safe. And we're going to be very careful, okay?" "Okay." He pressed close to her for a moment, then pulled back. "I should get the eggs." "Tommy, wait." Elena caught his hand. "From now on, you don't go anywhere alone. If you need to collect eggs or feed the chickens, you come get me first. Or stay where I can see you from the window. Understand?" Fear flickered in his eyes, but he nodded. "I understand." Elena watched him go, her heart aching. This was what she'd been trying to protect him from: the fear, the uncertainty, the knowledge that safety was always temporary. And yet here they were, living it all over again. She returned to her work with renewed determination. If someone wanted to drive them away, they'd have to do more than leave threatening notes. They'd have to face what Elena had become through 2 years of running and surviving, someone who knew how to endure. The day passed slowly. Elena prepared lunch, cleaned the kitchen, started preparations for dinner. She kept Tommy close, let him help with small tasks that kept him in her line of sight. Through the window she could see Jonah and the hands working in the near pastures, always within shouting distance of the house. Around mid-afternoon, a rider appeared on the horizon. Elena's pulse quickened until she recognized the horse. It was Davis, returning from town. He dismounted quickly and headed straight for where Jonah was mending fence. Elena couldn't hear the conversation, but she could see Jonah's body language shift, his shoulders squaring. Whatever news Davis brought, it wasn't good. When Jonah came in for dinner, his expression was grim. "What happened?" Elena asked quietly, while Tommy was distracted playing with the dog. "Davis went to town for supplies. Merrick's been busy." Jonah's jaw worked beneath his beard. "He's organizing a meeting tomorrow night. Says it's about community safety and protecting Blackwood's values." Elena's stomach dropped. "They're coming for me." "They're working themselves up to it." He poured coffee with hands that were perfectly steady, but Elena could see the tension in his shoulders. "Merrick's smart. He won't lead a mob directly. He'll let others do it. Make it look like the will of the people." "What will you do?" "What I should have done from the start." Jonah met her eyes. "I'm going to that meeting, and I'm going to tell them exactly what I think of their values." "That's dangerous." "So is sitting here waiting for them to work up their courage." He set down his cup. "But I need you to promise me something." "What?" "If things go wrong, if trouble comes to the ranch while I'm in town, you take Tommy and you run. Don't wait. Don't try to defend the place. Just get out." Elena shook her head. "I'm not running anymore." "This isn't about pride. It's about survival." Jonah's voice was hard. "These men, if they come, they won't be interested in conversation. They'll be looking to make an example, and I can't protect you if I'm in town." "Then don't go to town." "I have to. It's the only way to stop this before it gets worse." He leaned forward. "Promise me, Elena. Promise me you'll run if you have to." She wanted to refuse, wanted to stand her ground, fight back, prove she wasn't the frightened woman who'd fled Harper's Ferry. But she looked at Tommy across the room and remembered what was at stake. "I promise," she said quietly. The next day crawled by with agonizing slowness. Jonah spent the morning making preparations, loading his rifle, checking his pistol, giving quiet instructions to Davis and Miguel about watching the ranch while he was gone. He moved with the calm efficiency of a man going to war, and maybe that's exactly what it was. Elena cooked mechanically, her mind only half on the food. She made Jonah's favorites without thinking about it: roast beef, mashed potatoes, gravy, apple pie. A last meal, some dark part of her mind whispered, though she tried to silence it. At 4 o'clock, Jonah came to the kitchen dressed in his good clothes: clean trousers, a pressed shirt, a vest. He'd trimmed his beard and washed his hair. He looked like a different man, almost civilized, until you noticed the gun on his hip and the set of his jaw. "I'll be back before midnight," he said. Elena nodded, not trusting her voice. He hesitated, then said, "The things I said yesterday, about knowing what it's like to be judged. I meant them." "I know. My wife died 6 years ago, pneumonia, quick and brutal." His voice was flat, reciting facts. "Town doctor said there was nothing to be done. But some people, they decided I hadn't done enough. Hadn't called the doctor soon enough. Hadn't cared for her properly. By the time she was buried, half the town thought I'd killed her through negligence." Elena's throat tightened. "Jonah, I'm not looking for sympathy. I'm telling you so you understand why I'm doing this." He met her eyes. "I know what it's like to be branded guilty by people who don't know the truth and don't care to learn it. And I know what happens when you let them win. They take everything: your reputation, your peace, your future. I won't let that happen again. Not to you. Not to that boy." Before Elena could respond, he turned and walked out. She heard his horse's hooves on the hard ground, growing fainter, until there was nothing but silence. Davis appeared in the doorway. "Me and Miguel will be watching, Miss Ward. Anything seems wrong, you holler." "Thank you." After he left, Elena gathered Tommy and settled him at the kitchen table with his slate. She tried to act normal, to pretend this was just another evening, but her hands shook as she peeled potatoes, and she kept glancing toward the window, watching the sun sink lower. Sunset came painted in shades of orange and purple, beautiful and terrible. Elena lit lamps, closed curtains, checked the locks on the doors. She fed Tommy an early supper and got him ready for bed, though he was too nervous to sleep. "Tell me a story," he said, curled under the blanket. Elena sat on the edge of the bed and searched her memory for something comforting. Once there was a boy who lived in a castle made of glass. She wove a tale of magic and adventure, her voice steady even as her mind raced with worry. By the time she finished, Tommy's eyes were drifting closed. "Elena?" he murmured. "Is Mr. Jonah going to be okay?" "Yes," she said, with more confidence than she felt. "He's going to be just fine." She stayed until Tommy was deeply asleep, then returned to the kitchen. Charlie was at the table, his good hand wrapped around a cup of coffee, his injured arm resting in its sling. "Can't sleep either?" he asked. "No." Elena poured herself coffee she didn't want. "How's the arm?" "Hurts like hell, but I've had worse." He studied her face. "You're worried about the boss." "Aren't you?" "Sure, but Jonah's tough, and he's got right on his side, which counts for something." Charlie paused. "You care about him." It wasn't a question. Elena felt heat rise in her cheeks. "He's been kind to us." "It's more than that." Charlie's tone was gentle, not prying. "I've worked for Jonah 3 years now. Never seen him take an interest in anyone the way he has with you and Tommy. He's different around you, less locked up." Elena didn't know what to say to that. She wrapped her hands around her cup and stared into the dark liquid. They sat in companionable silence until footsteps on the porch made them both tense. Charlie's hand went to the pistol on the table. Elena grabbed a poker from beside the stove. But it was only Miguel, his young face tight with worry. "Miss Ward, Charlie, you should come see this." They followed him outside into the cool night. Davis was standing in the yard pointing toward town. Elena looked and felt her blood run cold. In the distance, maybe 5 miles away, the sky glowed orange. Not sunset, that had faded hours ago. This was fire. "Blackwood's burning," Davis said quietly. Elena's mind raced. The meeting, Jonah, the mob mentality that could turn a gathering into violence. "We have to go," she said. "We have to help." "No, ma'am." Miguel shook his head firmly. "Boss said to stay here, protect the ranch." "But if he's in danger, riding into town won't help him. It'll just put you in danger, too." Davis's voice was kind but firm. "We wait. We watch. We trust Jonah to handle himself." Elena wanted to argue, to saddle a horse and ride straight into that orange glow, but she thought about Tommy sleeping inside, vulnerable and trusting. She thought about Jonah's words. "Promise me you'll run if you have to." "All right," she said finally. "We wait." But waiting was torture. The minutes crawled by. The orange glow in the distance seemed to pulse and spread. Elena paced the kitchen, unable to sit still, while Charlie watched her with sympathetic eyes. "Tell me about Jonah's wife," she said finally, needing something to fill the silence. Charlie was quiet for a moment. "Her name was Sarah. She was good people. Quiet, like Jonah. They fit together." He paused. "When she died, something in Jonah died too. He closed himself off, stopped talking to folks in town, just worked the ranch and kept to himself. I thought he'd stay that way forever." "What changed?" "You did." Charlie met her eyes. "First time I saw him smile in 6 years was when Tommy presented him with those eggs like they were gold nuggets, and the way he looks at you." He trailed off, shaking his head. Elena's throat tightened. "Charlie?" "I'm not saying anything you don't already know." He stood, wincing. "I'm going to check on the horses. You stay inside." After he left, Elena stood alone in the kitchen, her mind a storm of worry and something else she didn't want to name. She thought about Jonah riding into town to defend her, thought about the way he'd looked at her before he left, like he was memorizing her face. She was still standing there, motionless, when hoofbeats sounded in the yard. Elena's heart leaped. She ran to the door, threw it open, and saw Jonah dismounting from his horse. He was covered in soot, his good clothes ruined, but he was whole and breathing and alive. "Jonah," she breathed. He looked up, and even in the lamplight she could see the exhaustion in his face. "It's over." Davis and Miguel came running. Charlie limped out from the barn. They all stood in the yard as Jonah tied his horse and climbed the porch steps. "What happened?" Elena asked. Jonah removed his hat, ran a hand through his hair. "Meeting turned into a mob, like I figured it would. Merrick worked them up good, talked about danger and protecting families and doing what's right. Was about to lead them here when someone pointed out smoke coming from the grain warehouse." "Fire?" Davis said sharply. "Big one. Burned half the warehouse before the bucket brigade got it under control." Jonah's mouth was a grim line. By then, the mob had scattered. Turns out people care more about protecting their property than harassing a woman they don't know. "Was anyone hurt?" Elena asked. "Few burns, nothing serious." He looked at her directly. "But Merrick's not done. He'll regroup, try again." "Then what do we do?" "We stop him." Jonah's voice was steel. "Permanently." Miguel shifted uneasily. "How, boss?" "By finding out who's really behind this, because I don't think Merrick's working alone." Jonah turned to Davis. "That fire tonight, it started in the back of the warehouse, away from where anyone would be smoking or carrying lanterns, and the door was locked from the outside." Understanding dawned on Elena's face. Someone said it deliberately. "To distract from the mob." Davis nodded slowly. "That's smart. And cruel." "And it tells us something important," Jonah said. "Whoever's doing this, they're willing to burn their own town to get what they want. That's not normal grudge behavior, that's obsession." Charlie spoke up from the doorway. "You think it's personal? Against Miss Ward specifically? Or against me?" Jonah's jaw was tight. "For taking her in, for defying them." "Either way," Miguel said quietly, "they're escalating." The truth of it hung heavy in the night air. This wasn't just about driving Elena away anymore. It had become something darker, more dangerous. "Everyone get some sleep," Jonah said finally. "Tomorrow, we figure out our next move." The hands dispersed. Elena started to follow them inside, but Jonah caught her arm gently. "I need to tell you something," he said. They stood on the porch in the darkness, close enough that Elena could see the soot streaked across his face, smell the smoke in his clothes. "What is it?" she asked. "At the meeting, before the fire, Merrick said some things, about you, about your past." Jonah's eyes were steady on hers. "He's been writing letters to towns back east, collecting stories, building a case." Elena's stomach dropped. "What kind of stories?" "The worst kind. Things about the fire." About Tommy. About, he hesitated. About you being dangerous, unstable, a threat to any community that takes you in. None of that's true. I know, but truth doesn't matter to men like Merrick. What matters is the narrative they can build. He paused. He's planning to present his evidence to the territorial marshal, try to get you arrested. For what? I haven't committed any crime. For kidnapping Tommy, for arson, for endangering public safety. Jonah's voice was grim. He's building a case that looks legal on paper, and if it goes before the wrong judge, I could hang. Elena said it flatly, without emotion, though her insides were screaming. Not if I have anything to say about it. Jonah stepped closer. But Elena, we need to be smart about this. We need proof that you're innocent. Real proof. Not just your word against theirs. What kind of proof? Witnesses from Harper's Ferry will testify the fire wasn't your fault. Records showing Tommy had no living relatives. Anything that contradicts Merrick's narrative. He paused. I can send for them. Wire some contacts back east, but it'll take time. How much time? Weeks. Maybe a month. And in the meantime? In the meantime, you stay here, where I can protect you. His hand was still on her arm, warm and solid. I won't let them take you. Elena looked up at him, this hard, scarred man who'd become her unlikely champion. Why are you doing this, really? Jonah was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough with honesty. Because when Sarah died, I let the town's judgment break me. I stopped fighting, stopped caring, stopped living. His eyes met hers. You reminded me what it's like to have something worth fighting for. The words hung between them, weighted with meaning. Elena's heart hammered in her chest. Jonah, she started, but he stepped back, breaking the moment. Get some sleep. Tomorrow's going to be hard. He was gone before she could respond, disappearing into the darkness toward the barn. Elena stood alone on the porch, her arm still warm where he'd touched her, her mind reeling. Inside, she checked on Tommy, still sleeping peacefully, unaware of how close danger had come, then finally allowed herself to sink into bed. But sleep wouldn't come. She stared at the ceiling and thought about Jonah's words, about the fire in town, about Merrick's growing obsession. They were running out of time. The noose was tightening, and she didn't know how to escape it, unless they could turn the tables, unless they could expose whoever was really behind this before Merrick's legal case could take hold. The thought sparked something in Elena's mind, a possibility. Dangerous, but possible. If someone was obsessed enough to burn a warehouse, they'd made a mistake. Obsessed people always did. They got careless, left trails. All Elena had to do was find that trail before it was too late. She thought about this until exhaustion finally pulled her under. And when she dreamed, it was of fire and smoke and a man with pale blue eyes standing between her and the flames. Morning broke clear and cold, the kind of autumn day that promised winter wasn't far behind. Elena woke with her plan already forming, sharp and complete as if her sleeping mind had been working on it all night. She dressed quickly, checked on Tommy, and found Jonah already in the kitchen, coffee brewing. "You're up early," he said. "Couldn't sleep." Elena poured herself a cup, the steam curling in the cold air. "I've been thinking about what you said, about finding proof." Jonah leaned against the counter, watching her. "And?" "You said obsessed people make mistakes. They get careless." Elena met his eyes. "Whoever set that fire in town, they left evidence. And whoever's been sabotaging the ranch, they've left evidence too. We just haven't been looking for it." "What kind of evidence?" "The fence that was cut, the note that was left, the spoiled milk, the overcharged supplies, all of it." Elena's words came faster now, energized by the clarity of her thinking. "There's a pattern, a person behind it. And if we can identify that person, we can prove this isn't about me being dangerous. It's about someone with a personal vendetta." Jonah considered this. "You want to investigate." "I want to stop waiting for the next attack and start fighting back." She set down her cup. "But I need your help. I need to know who in town hates you enough to do this, or who hated your wife, or who had something to gain from driving me away." A shadow crossed Jonah's face at the mention of Sarah, but he didn't flinch from the question. "There's one person who fits that description, Thomas Hendricks." "The dairy farmer?" His son, actually. Thomas Jr. Jonah's voice went flat. He courted Sarah before I did, proposed to her twice. She turned him down both times, chose me instead. He never forgave either of us for it. Elena's mind raced, connecting pieces. The spoiled milk. It started with Hendricks. And he's been friends with Merrick since they were boys. Jonah's jaw tightened. After Sarah died, Thomas spread the worst of the rumors. Said I'd neglected her deliberately because I'd never loved her as much as he did. Said she should have married him instead. But you said Hendricks brought fresh milk after you spoke to him. I told him I'd take my business elsewhere and make sure everyone knew why. He backed down. Jonah paused. But that doesn't mean he stopped hating me. It just means he got more careful about showing it. Elena thought about the pattern of attacks, the escalation, the way each incident seemed designed to create maximum pressure without leaving clear evidence. It fits. A man with a grudge, working through Merrick to make it look like community action instead of personal revenge. We still need proof. Then let's get it. Elena straightened her shoulders. The note that was left at the fence, do you still have it? In my desk. And the cut wire? Stored in the barn. I want to see them. And I want to see the fence line where it happened. Elena's voice was firm. If Thomas did this, he left traces. We just have to find them. Jonah studied her for a long moment, something like admiration in his pale eyes. You're not what I expected when you walked onto this ranch. What did you expect? Someone broken. Someone running. He shook his head slightly. But you're a fighter. You were just waiting for a reason to stop running and start swinging. The observation struck Elena as profoundly true. She'd been so focused on protecting Tommy, on survival, that she'd forgotten she could do more than endure. She could act. Will you help me? She asked. Yes. The answer came without hesitation. But we do this smart, no unnecessary risks, and Tommy stays here with Charlie. They spent the morning examining the evidence. The note was written in crude block letters, clearly disguised, but the paper itself was distinctive. Thick stock, the kind used for business correspondence. The cut wire showed clean edges, made with good tools, not the rough hack of a dull blade. And when they rode out to the fence line, Elena noticed something the men had missed in their hurry during the storm. Hoof prints. Not ranch horses, which had distinctive shoes, but a horse with a chipped front left shoe that left a telltale mark in the mud. We need to check the blacksmith's records, Elena said, photographing the print in her mind. See who had a horse with that particular shoe. Jonah crouched beside the print, studying it. Blacksmith in town won't cooperate. Not if it implicates someone local. Then we don't ask. We look. Elena turned to him. You said you were going to wire contacts back east for witnesses. Do it. But also wire the territorial marshal directly. Tell him you have evidence of ongoing criminal activity and you're conducting a private investigation. Make it official. That'll spook Merrick. Good. Spooked people make mistakes too. Elena's eyes were hard. And while you're doing that, I'm going to do some investigating of my own. Jonah stood, alarm crossing his face. Absolutely not. You're not going anywhere near town. I'm not going to town. I'm going to talk to the one person who might actually tell me the truth. Elena mounted her horse. Mrs. Hendricks, the dairy farmer's wife. Elena, think about it, Jonah. If Thomas is behind this, his wife might know something or suspect something, and she might talk to another woman when she wouldn't talk to you. Or she might be part of it. Then I'll find that out too. Elena gathered the reins. I'm not asking permission. I'm telling you what I'm doing. You can help me or you can try to stop me, but either way, I'm going. For a moment, she thought Jonah might physically prevent her from leaving. Then his mouth quirked in something that might have been a smile. You're stubborn as hell. I learned from the best. She looked down at him. Will you cover me? Stay close enough to help if things go wrong? I'll be right behind you. Out of sight, but close. His expression sobered. But Elena, if this goes bad, you ride. Don't try to be a hero. I'm not trying to be a hero. I'm trying to save my life and Tommy's future. She touched her heels to the horse's flanks. Let's go. They rode out together, Jonah falling back as they approached the Hendricks property so Elena could approach alone. The farm was modest but well kept, with a neat house, a barn, and dairy cows grazing in fenced pastures. Elena dismounted at the gate and walked toward the house, her heart hammering but her steps steady. A woman appeared on the porch before Elena reached it. Mrs. Hendricks was perhaps 50, thin and weathered, with gray-streaked hair pulled back in a severe bun. Her eyes were wary, but not hostile. "Mrs. Hendricks," Elena said. "My name is Elena Ward. I work at Iron Creek Ranch. I know who you are." The woman's voice was neutral. "What do you want?" "To talk, just for a few minutes." Elena kept her hands visible, non-threatening. "I'm not here to cause trouble." "Then you shouldn't have come at all." But Mrs. Hendricks didn't go inside. She stood there, arms crossed, waiting. "Your husband delivers milk to the ranch," Elena said carefully. "There was an incident. Spoiled milk. Mr. Hale spoke to him about it. My husband made a mistake. It won't happen again." "I don't think it was a mistake." Elena watched the woman's face closely. "I think someone pressured him to deliver bad milk, to cause problems for the ranch. For me specifically." Mrs. Hendricks' expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. Fear, maybe, or recognition. "That's a serious accusation," she said. "I know, and I wouldn't make it without reason." Elena took a breath. "Mrs. Hendricks, I'm not here to get anyone in trouble. I'm here because someone is trying to destroy my life, and I think it might be connected to your family. If I'm wrong, tell me. But if I'm right—" She paused. "If I'm right, then you know what it's like to live with a man consumed by old grudges. And maybe you're tired of it too." The silence stretched between them, taut as wire. Then Mrs. Hendricks sighed, a sound of such weariness that Elena's heart ached. "Come inside," she said quietly. "But only for a minute." The house was clean but cold, as if warmth had been banished along with joy. Mrs. Hendricks gestured to a chair at the kitchen table and sat across from Elena, her hands folded in her lap. "My son Thomas," she said, "loved Sarah Hale with the kind of love that doesn't fade when it's not returned. It festers, grows bitter." She looked at her hands. "When she married Jonah, Thomas changed, became angry all the time, blamed Jonah for stealing his future, blamed Sarah for being blind to his worth. And when she died," Elena asked softly, "he said it was justice, said Jonah didn't deserve her, so fate took her away." Mrs. Hendricks' voice cracked slightly. "I tried to talk to him, tried to make him see how wrong that thinking was, but grief and bitterness had twisted him up inside." "Where's Thomas now?" "Working in town. He has a position at Merrick's Bank." The older woman met Elena's eyes. "They're close, those two, always whispering, always planning something." Elena's pulse quickened. "Planning what?" "I don't know specifics, but Thomas comes home late some nights, smelling of smoke and whiskey, with mud on his boots and satisfaction in his eyes." Mrs. Hendricks' hands trembled slightly. "And 3 nights ago, the night of the fire in town, he didn't come home at all. Said he was helping with the bucket brigade, but his clothes were clean when he finally returned. No soot, no water stains, nothing." "You think he set the fire?" "I think my son is capable of terrible things when he believes he's been wronged." She stood abruptly. "You need to leave now. If Thomas finds out I talked to you, he won't. I promise." Elena stood too. "But Mrs. Hendricks, I need you to do something. If you see or hear anything that proves Thomas is behind these attacks, will you tell the marshal?" The woman's face was anguished. "He's my son." "I know, but other people could get hurt. The fire could have killed someone. And if this continues—" Elena let the implication hang. Mrs. Hendricks walked to the window, staring out at the farm her husband had built. "There's a box," she said finally, "in Thomas's room. Locked. He thinks I don't know about it, but I do. I saw him putting papers in it one night. Letters, I think. And something else. Something wrapped in cloth. Can you get it?" "No, he keeps the key on him always." She turned back to Elena. "But if someone were to look in his room at the bank, in his desk drawer—" She trailed off meaningfully. Elena understood. Mrs. Hendricks couldn't betray her son directly, but she could point the way for someone else to find the truth. "Thank you," Elena said quietly. "Don't thank me. Just stop him before he does something that can't be undone. Mrs. Hendricks walked Elena to the door. And Miss Ward? Be careful. Thomas is not just bitter, he's clever. And clever bitter men are the most dangerous kind. Elena rode away from the Hendricks farm with her mind racing. Jonah emerged from the tree line where he'd been waiting and fell into step beside her. Well? He asked. Thomas Hendricks works at Merrick's bank. His mother thinks he set the fire in town, and there's evidence hidden somewhere in his office. Elena looked at Jonah. We need to get into that bank. That's breaking and entering. That's gathering evidence. She met his eyes. Unless you have a better idea. Jonah was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, The bank closes at 5. Merrick usually leaves by 6. Thomas sometimes works later doing bookkeeping. How do you know that? I make it my business to know things about people who might cause me trouble. He paused. There's a back window that doesn't latch properly. I noticed it last time I was there. Elena stared at him. You're actually suggesting we break into the bank. I'm suggesting we retrieve evidence of a crime. What we do with that evidence afterward is up to the marshal. His expression was grim. But if we're going to do this, we do it tonight, before Merrick can move forward with his legal case against you. What about Tommy? Charlie and the others can watch him. They'll keep the ranch secure. Jonah turned his horse toward home. We leave at midnight, dress dark. And Elena? Yes? If we get caught, you run. Let me take the blame. Understood? Absolutely not. Elena? No, Jonah. We're in this together. If we're caught, we face it together. She urged her horse faster. Now let's go prepare. The rest of the day passed in tense preparation. Elena explained to Charlie what they were planning, swearing him to secrecy. The young cowboy's eyes went wide. Boss is going to break into Merrick's bank? We're going to gather evidence, Elena corrected. There's a difference. Not one the law will care about if you're caught. But Charlie nodded. I'll watch Tommy. And if anyone comes to the ranch, I'll fire 3 shots. You'll hear it in town. Thank you. Elena spent the evening with Tommy, reading him stories and trying to act normal even as anxiety gnawed at her. When she finally tucked him into bed, he looked up at her with those 2 old eyes. You're scared, he said. A little, she admitted. Is it because of the bad people in town? Elena brushed hair from his forehead. It's because I'm trying to make things right, and sometimes that's scary, but it's also necessary. Like when you came to get me from the cellar? Tommy's voice was small. After the fire? You were scared then too, but you came anyway. Elena's throat tightened. Yes, just like that. Then you'll be okay. He said it with such simple faith that Elena almost believed it. You're brave. Mr. Jonah said so. He did? Yesterday when I was helping him in the barn, he said you were the bravest person he'd ever met because you keep fighting even when you're scared. Tommy yawned. I think he's right. Elena kissed his forehead. Go to sleep, sweetheart. I'll be here when you wake up. She waited until his breathing deepened, then slipped out to find Jonah already waiting, dressed in dark clothes, a rope coiled over his shoulder. Ready? He asked. As I'll ever be. They rode through the darkness, the moon a thin crescent that barely lit their way. Blackwood was mostly dark when they arrived, just a few lamps burning in windows where people sat up late. The bank stood on Main Street, a solid brick building that looked forbidding in the shadows. Jonah led Elena around to the back, where an alley provided cover. He examined the window he'd mentioned, tested it gently, and it swung open with barely a sound. After you, he whispered. Elena climbed through, dropping lightly into what appeared to be a storage room. Jonah followed, closing the window behind them. They stood still for a moment, listening for any sound of occupation. Nothing. Thomas's office is upstairs, Jonah breathed in her ear. Second door on the right. They moved through the bank like ghosts, Elena's heart hammering so loud she was certain someone would hear it. The stairs creaked softly under their weight. At the top, a hallway stretched before them with several doors. Second door on the right. Elena tried the handle. Locked. Jonah pulled a thin piece of metal from his pocket and worked the lock with practiced efficiency. Within seconds, it clicked open. Where did you learn that? Elena whispered. Later. He pushed the door open. Thomas Hendrick's office was neat to the point of obsession. Papers stacked precisely. Pens lined up like soldiers. Everything in its place. Elena moved to the desk and began searching drawers while Jonah kept watch at the door. The first drawer held ledgers. The second, correspondence. The third was locked. "Here," Elena hissed. Jonah came over and picked this lock too. Inside, they found exactly what Mrs. Hendricks had promised, a stack of letters bound with string and something wrapped in oilcloth. Elena unfolded the cloth carefully. Inside was a can of kerosene and a bundle of rags. "Fire-starting materials," Jonah said grimly. Elena turned to the letters. The first few were old, addressed to Sarah before she married Jonah. Love letters, passionate and pleading. But as Elena went deeper, the tone changed. The words became bitter, accusatory. And then, at the bottom of the stack, she found letters dated after Sarah's death. These weren't addressed to anyone. They were drafts, plans written in Thomas's meticulous hand, plans for revenge against Jonah, plans to drive away anyone who worked for him, anyone who showed him kindness, anyone who might help him move past Sarah's memory. And at the very bottom, a letter dated 2 weeks ago. A letter to Samuel Merrick, outlining a plan to manufacture evidence against Elena Ward, to pressure Jonah into sending her away by any means necessary, and if that failed, to use legal channels to have her arrested and removed. "This is it," Elena breathed. "This proves everything." "Take it," Jonah said. "Take all of it. We'll bring it to the marshal." The front door of the bank opened below them. Elena and Jonah froze. Footsteps echoed through the building, accompanied by voices. One she recognized as Merrick. The other was unfamiliar but young, probably Thomas. "The ledgers are in my office," Merrick was saying. "We'll review the accounts now, make sure everything's in order before the territorial inspector arrives tomorrow." They were coming upstairs. Jonah grabbed Elena's arm, pulling her toward the window, but it faced the street. They'd be seen if they climbed out. The footsteps grew closer. Voices in the hall now. "Check your office first," Merrick said. "Make sure you have those correspondence files I asked about." Thomas's office. They were coming to Thomas's office. Jonah looked around frantically, then pulled Elena toward a tall cabinet against the wall. They squeezed inside, pulling the door nearly closed just as the office door opened. Through the crack, Elena could see Thomas Hendricks, a tall, thin man with his mother's severe features and eyes that burned with barely contained rage. He went straight to his desk, opened the locked drawer, and stopped. "Merrick," he called, his voice tight. "Someone's been in my desk." Footsteps. Merrick appeared in the doorway. "What?" "The lock's been picked, and the letters—" Thomas's hands were shaking as he rifled through the drawer. "They're gone. The evidence is gone." "Gone?" Merrick's face went pale. "How is that possible?" "Someone knew. Someone found out." Thomas slammed the drawer shut. "It was her, the Ward woman. It had to be." "Don't be absurd. She's at the ranch." "Then Jonah, or someone working for him." Thomas's voice rose. "They have everything. The letters, the plans. They have proof." "Proof of what?" Merrick's tone turned sharp. "We've done nothing illegal." "You haven't, but I—" Thomas stopped, seeming to realize what he was admitting. Merrick's eyes narrowed. "What did you do, Thomas?" "What you wanted. What we planned." Thomas's face was desperate now. "The sabotage, the threats, the fire, all of it to pressure Jonah into getting rid of her." "I never told you to start fires. You said to use any means necessary. You said—" "I said to apply community pressure, to make her unwelcome, not to commit arson." Merrick stepped back, his expression hardening. "If those letters prove you set that fire, you're on your own. I won't be implicated in your crimes." "My crimes?" "You're the one who wanted her gone. Because she's bad for business. A woman with a criminal past working at a prominent ranch makes the whole town look careless." Merrick's voice was cold. "But I would never condone violence, and I certainly wouldn't put it in writing." Thomas stared at him, betrayal and rage warring on his face. "You're abandoning me." "I'm protecting myself, as you should have done." Merrick turned toward the door. "I suggest you leave town, tonight, before whoever took those letters brings them to the marshal." I'm not running. Then you're a fool. Merrick paused at the door. And Thomas? If you mention my name to the authorities, I'll deny everything. Your word against mine, and I'm a respected banker while you're a clerk with an unhealthy obsession. Who do you think they'll believe? He left. Thomas stood alone in the office, his breathing ragged. Then, with a roar of frustration, he swept everything off his desk. Papers flew, the inkwell shattered against the wall. In the cabinet, Elena held her breath, certain they'd be discovered. But Thomas stormed out without looking back, his footsteps thundering down the stairs. The front door slammed. Elena and Jonah waited in the silence that followed, counting seconds that felt like hours. Finally, Jonah eased the cabinet door open. "We need to move," he whispered. "Now." They climbed out the window they'd entered through, dropping into the alley just as church bells struck 2 in the morning. They'd been inside for nearly 2 hours, though it had felt like minutes. Jonah helped Elena onto her horse, the letters tucked safely inside her jacket. They rode out of town at a careful walk, not running, not drawing attention. Only when they were well clear did Jonah allow the horses to speed up. "That was close," Elena said, her voice shaking with residual adrenaline. "Too close." Jonah looked at her. "But we got what we needed." "We got everything." Elena patted the letters against her chest. Merrick abandoned Thomas, and Thomas admitted to the fire and the sabotage. "It's all over." "Not yet. We still need to get this to the marshal." Jonah urged his horse faster. "And we need to do it before Thomas does something desperate." They rode through the darkness toward Iron Creek, toward Tommy and safety, and the hope that maybe, finally, this nightmare was ending. But as they crested the hill overlooking the ranch, Elena saw something that made her blood run cold. Smoke, rising from the direction of the ranch buildings, and the sound of gunshots echoing through the night. Not 3 shots, not a signal, the rapid, desperate firing of men under attack. "Tommy," Elena breathed. Then she was riding, faster than she'd ever ridden, with Jonah thundering beside her and fear giving wings to their horses' hooves. The ranch was burning, and her child was inside. The horses ate up the ground between the hilltop and the ranch yard, their hooves striking sparks from stone, but to Elena every second stretched into eternity. Smoke billowed from the barn, orange flames licking through gaps in the wood, and the gunshots had stopped, a silence more terrifying than the noise had been. They thundered into the yard, and Elena was off her horse before it fully stopped, running toward the house screaming Tommy's name. Jonah caught her arm, pulling her back with iron strength. "Wait," he commanded, his voice cutting through her panic. "Look!" Elena forced herself to focus. The barn was burning, yes, but the house stood untouched. And there, on the porch, Miguel crouched behind an overturned table with his rifle trained on the darkness beyond the yard. He turned at the sound of their arrival, relief flooding his face. "Boss, Miss Ward! Thank God you're back!" "Where's Tommy?" Elena's voice cracked. "Where's Charlie?" "Safe. Inside. Charlie's got them locked in the back room." Miguel gestured toward the barn. "Bastards set the fire and took shots at us when we tried to put it out. Davis is around back, making sure he doesn't circle to the house." "How many?" Jonah demanded, already moving toward cover. "Just one, far as we can tell. Came in on foot about an hour ago. Set the barn? Waited for us to come running, then opened fire." Miguel's jaw was tight. "Horses are still in there, boss. We couldn't get them out." The sound that came from Jonah was barely human. He started toward the burning barn, but Elena grabbed his arm this time. "You can't," she said, though it tore her heart to say it. "Jonah, the roof's going to collapse any minute. You'll die. Those horses are already dead or will be soon." She held his gaze, willing him to hear her. "But Tommy needs you alive. I need you alive." For a moment she thought he'd shake her off and run into the flames anyway. Then his shoulders sagged and he turned away, unable to watch his animals burn. A shot rang out from the darkness beyond the corrals. The bullet struck the porch railing, sending splinters flying. Miguel returned fire, the muzzle flash bright in the darkness. "He's moving closer," Miguel said, "getting bolder. Or more desperate." Jonah pulled his pistol, checking the chambers with practiced efficiency. "Elena, get inside with Tommy. Lock the doors and don't open them for anyone but me." "I'm not leaving you. That's not a request." His eyes were hard. If this is Thomas, and I think it is, he's here to finish what he started, which means he's here for you. Don't give him the satisfaction. Elena wanted to argue, but she knew he was right. She was the target. Staying outside just put everyone at greater risk. She ran for the house, keeping low, and burst through the door. Charlie met her in the hallway, his good hand gripping a shotgun. Miss Ward. Where's Tommy? Back bedroom. Doors barred. Charlie's face was pale, sweat beading on his forehead. His broken arm had to be agony, but he stood steady. Is the boss? He's fine. They're both fine. Elena moved past him toward the bedroom. Stay at the front window. Watch for anyone trying to get around back. She found the bedroom door, as Charlie had said, barred from the inside. She knocked quietly. Tommy, it's me. Open up. The sound of furniture scraping, then the door cracked open. Tommy's face appeared, tear-streaked but determined. He threw himself at Elena, wrapping his arms around her waist. I was scared, he whispered against her dress. I know, sweetheart. I know. She held him tight, breathing in the smell of his hair, reassuring herself he was real and whole and safe. But you were brave. You did exactly what you were supposed to do. Is Mr. Jonah okay? He's fine. He's out there making sure the bad man can't hurt us. Elena pulled back, kneeling to look Tommy in the eye. I need you to stay here. Keep the door barred. Don't open it for anyone but me or Mr. Jonah or Charlie. Understand? Tommy nodded, but his grip on her hand didn't loosen. Don't go. I have to help, but I'll come back, I promise. She kissed his forehead. Be brave a little longer. She eased out of the room, waited until she heard the bar slide back into place, then returned to the front of the house. Through the window, she could see the barn fully engulfed now, the flames reaching toward the night sky. Jonah and Miguel were still behind cover, watching the darkness. Another shot. This one from a different angle. Davis, firing from somewhere behind the house. An answering cry of pain, then the sound of someone running. He's hit! Davis shouted, moving toward the creek. Jonah was up and running before Elena could blink, moving with surprising speed for a man his size. Miguel followed, and Elena saw Davis emerge from the shadows to join the pursuit. She stood at the window, heart in her throat, watching them disappear into the darkness. The minutes that followed were agony. Elena strained to hear over the roar of the burning barn, every sound magnified by fear. Charlie stood beside her, breathing hard, his injured arm cradled against his chest. They'll get him, he said, though he sounded like he was trying to convince himself as much as her. Then, finally, voices. Men returning. Elena ran to the door and threw it open as Jonah emerged from the darkness, dragging someone by the collar. Miguel and Davis flanked them, rifles ready. In the light spilling from the house, Elena saw Thomas Hendricks. He was bleeding from a wound in his shoulder, his face twisted with pain and rage, his eyes wild. You! He spat when he saw Elena. This is all your fault. Everything. If you'd just left like you were supposed to— Shut up, Jonah said without heat, dropping Thomas onto the porch. Miguel, get rope. Thomas tried to rise, but Davis put a boot on his chest, holding him down. Stay down unless you want another hole in you. Miguel returned with rope, and they bound Thomas's hands, none too gently. The man writhed and cursed, spewing vitriol about Elena, about Jonah, about Sarah, and injustice and everything he'd lost. She didn't deserve you, Thomas snarled at Jonah. Sarah was too good for a brute like you. She should have been mine. We would have been happy. But you took her, and then you killed her through your neglect. And now you dare to replace her with this murderer. Jonah's fist connected with Thomas's jaw, snapping his head back. The man went limp, unconscious. Probably shouldn't have done that, Miguel observed. Probably not. Jonah flexed his hand, wincing. Tie him to the porch post. Davis, ride to town and get the marshal. Tell him we have his arsonist. On it, boss. Davis headed for the corral where the horses not in the barn had been pastured. Elena moved to Jonah's side, examining his bleeding knuckles. You should let me clean that. Later, but his voice had lost its hard edge. The barn— They both turned to watch it burn. The roof had collapsed now, sending up a shower of sparks. 5 horses had been in there, good animals Jonah had raised from foals. Gone now, along with tack, tools, feed stores, months of work, and years of investment destroyed in minutes. "I'm sorry," Elena said quietly. "Not your fault." Jonah's jaw was tight. This is on Thomas, on his hatred, on his inability to let go of something that was never his to begin with. "Still, if you hadn't come here, I'd still be half dead inside, going through the motions of living without actually living." He looked at her, his pale eyes reflecting the firelight. "Yes, you brought trouble. But you also brought life back to this place. Don't apologize for that." Before Elena could respond, Charlie called from the doorway, "Boss, you better see this." They went inside to find Charlie at the table, the letters Elena had taken from Thomas's office spread out before him. He'd been reading while they dealt with Thomas, and his face was grim. "Miss Ward, you need to see this one." He handed her a letter dated 3 days ago. Elena read it, her blood turning cold. It was addressed to the territorial marshal, signed by Samuel Merrick, claiming that Elena Ward was a fugitive wanted for arson and murder in Harper's Ferry, that she'd kidnapped a child and fled west, that she posed an immediate danger to the community and should be arrested on sight. "He sent this," she whispered. "The marshal is probably already on his way." "Then we show him the rest of the letters," Jonah said. "Show him that Merrick and Thomas conspired to frame you, that Thomas committed the actual crimes. The truth will be my word against a respected banker's." Elena set down the letter with shaking hands. "Merrick will deny everything, just like he said. And without witnesses from Harper's Ferry to confirm my story about the original fire, it's just accusations and old letters that prove Thomas was bitter, but not that I'm innocent." The weight of it settled over the room like a shroud. They'd gathered evidence of the conspiracy against the ranch, but not proof of Elena's innocence in Harper's Ferry. And if the marshal came with Merrick's letter as his authority, he could arrest her before they had a chance to mount a proper defense. Tommy appeared in the hallway, having heard voices. "Elena, what's wrong?" She knelt and pulled him close, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. After everything, the investigation, the risk, the desperate ride through the night, she was still going to lose. Still going to be taken away while Tommy watched, helpless. "No," Jonah's voice cut through her despair. "We're not done fighting, not even close. Jonah, the marshal will come. Fine. Let him come." Jonah's expression was fierce. "But he's going to have to hear what really happened in Harper's Ferry. From someone who was there. From someone who watched you risk your life to save a child from the flames." Elena's heart stopped. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying we wire east, tonight. We find people who knew you in Harper's Ferry, people who knew the boarding house owner's son and his lies. We get depositions, sworn statements, anything that establishes the truth." He was already moving toward the door. "Davis is riding to town anyway. He can send wires from the telegraph office." "At this hour? I'll pay whatever it takes to wake up the operator." Jonah grabbed his hat. "Give me names, Elena. Everyone you can think of who might speak for you." Elena's mind raced, sorting through memories of a life that felt like it belonged to someone else. "Mrs. Patterson. She ran the general store and gave me work when others wouldn't. She never believed the accusations." "Good. Who else?" "Reverend Michaels. He questioned the boarding house owner's son publicly, said the accusations didn't match the woman he knew." Elena was standing now, hope beginning to kindle. "And there was a firefighter, I don't remember his name, but he gave testimony that the fire started in the kitchen, not the upper floors where I slept. Said it was probably an accident, not arson." Jonah was writing everything down. "Anything else? Anyone who can speak to Tommy's situation?" "The sheriff, Sheriff Dawes. He refused to arrest me because he said there was no evidence. He knew about Tommy's mother dying in the fire, knew I'd taken him in." Elena's voice strengthened. "He told me to leave town because he couldn't protect me from the court of public opinion, but he never believed I was guilty." "Perfect." Jonah finished writing and headed for the door. "Davis!" The cowboy was just mounting up. Jonah ran to him, thrust the paper into his hand, and gave rapid instructions. Davis nodded, touched his hat, and rode off into the night at a gallop. Jonah returned to the porch where Thomas was beginning to stir, groaning. He checked the bonds, satisfied they were secure, then came back inside. "Now we wait," he said. "The marshal could be here by morning," Charlie pointed out. "Then we hold him off until we have what we need." Jonah's voice was steel. "I won't let them take her without a fight." Elena looked at him, this hard, damaged man who'd shown her more loyalty in a few weeks than most people showed in a lifetime, and felt something shift in her chest. Not just gratitude, not just relief. Something deeper, more dangerous, more real. "Why are you doing this?" she asked quietly. Jonah met her eyes, and for once, he didn't deflect or change the subject. "Because when you walked onto my ranch with that boy in tow, and nothing but hope holding you together, you reminded me what courage looks like. Real courage. Not the kind that comes from being fearless, but the kind that comes from being terrified and doing what's right anyway." He paused, and because somewhere along the way this stopped being about giving you a job and became about something else. The air between them crackled with unspoken words. Tommy, watching from Elena's side, looked between them with a small smile. "Mr. Jonah likes you," he said matter-of-factly. "Tommy," Elena started. "He does. I can tell." Tommy yawned, leaning against her. "It's okay. I like him too." The moment broke, but the truth of it remained, hanging in the air like smoke. They spent the rest of the night taking turns on watch, keeping the fire in the yard contained, tending to Thomas's wound, not out of kindness, but because they needed him alive to face justice. As dawn broke pale and cold, Miguel spotted riders approaching. "3 of them," he called from the porch. "One's the marshal. Other 2, he squinted. "One's Merrick. Don't know the third." Elena's stomach knotted. "Already?" "We stand our ground." Jonah checked his pistol one more time. "Remember, we have evidence, we have Thomas, and we have the truth." The riders came into the yard and dismounted. The marshal was a weathered man in his 50s, with iron-gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. He wore a badge and carried authority like a well-worn coat. Samuel Merrick looked nervous, his usual polish diminished. The third man was a stranger, young, well-dressed, carrying a leather satchel. "Jonah Hale," the marshal said. "I'm Marshal Cordell. Got a wire saying you had evidence of criminal activity." "I do." Jonah gestured to Thomas, still bound to the porch post. "Thomas Hendricks. Arson, attempted murder, conspiracy, and destruction of property." Merrick stepped forward. "Marshal, this is absurd. Thomas Hendricks works for me. He's a respected—" "He's confessed," Jonah interrupted. "We have witnesses. We have physical evidence, and we have letters in his own hand detailing his crimes." The marshal's eyes sharpened. "Show me." They laid it all out on the kitchen table. The letters, the fire-starting materials, the written plans for revenge. Charlie and Miguel gave their testimony about the attack. Elena showed the threatening note left at the fence. The marshal listened, examined the evidence, and his expression grew increasingly grim. "Mr. Merrick," he said finally, "these letters implicate you in a conspiracy." "I had nothing to do with Thomas's actions," Merrick said quickly. "Yes, I spoke with him about concerns regarding Miss Ward's presence in town, but I never authorized violence. You have to believe me, Marshal. What I believe doesn't matter. What matters is what I can prove." The marshal turned to the third man. "This is why I brought Judge Morrison. He'll hear statements and determine if charges should be filed." The judge sat up at the kitchen table, pulling out paper and pen. What followed was hours of testimony. Jonah spoke about the pattern of harassment. Miguel and Davis described the attacks. Charlie detailed the sabotage. And Elena, with a shaking voice but steady resolve, told her story. All of it, from Harper's Ferry to the fire to Tommy to this moment. When she finished, the judge was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Miss Ward, you're aware there's a warrant being processed for your arrest based on Mr. Merrick's letter to the marshal?" "Yes, sir." "And you maintain that the accusations in that letter are false?" "I do, sir." "Can you prove it?" "I'm trying to, sir. I've sent for witnesses from Harper's Ferry, people who know the truth about what happened." Elena's voice didn't waver. "But even if they don't arrive in time, even if you have to arrest me based on Mr. Merrick's word, I'm asking you to hear the truth first. To look at the evidence of what's really been happening here. To see that this isn't about justice, It's about revenge and hatred, and a man who couldn't accept that the woman he wanted didn't want him back. The judge studied her for a long moment. Then he turned to Thomas, who'd been brought inside and seated under guard. "Mr. Hendricks, you've been accused of serious crimes. How do you plead?" Thomas's face was a mask of bitterness. "I did what needed to be done." "That's not an answer." "I burned the barn. I shot at them. I tried to drive her away." Thomas's eyes locked on Elena. "Because she doesn't deserve to be here. Doesn't deserve Jonah's protection. Sarah was worth 10 of her, and if Jonah had cared for Sarah the way he seems to care for this woman, Sarah would still be alive." "Mr. Hendricks," the judge said quietly, "you're confessing to arson and attempted murder." "I'm confessing to doing what everyone else was too cowardly to do." Thomas's voice rose. "That woman is poison. She burned down a boarding house back east, killed 4 people, and kidnapped a child. And instead of facing justice, she runs west and tricks good men into protecting her. Well, I won't let it happen. I won't. That's enough." The marshal hauled Thomas to his feet. "Thomas Hendricks, you're under arrest for arson, attempted murder, and conspiracy. Judge, I assume you'll want him held for trial?" "I do." The judge made notes. "Mr. Merrick, based on the evidence presented, I'm inclined to believe you were manipulated rather than actively conspiring. However, I'm ordering you to remain available for further questioning. If you attempt to leave the territory, you'll be arrested." Merrick's face went white. "Yes, Your Honor." "As for Miss Ward," the judge looked at Elena, "the accusations against you are serious, but they're also contradicted by significant evidence suggesting a conspiracy to defame you. Until such time as witnesses from Harper's Ferry can be deposed, I'm placing you under Jonah Hale's recognizance. You'll remain at this ranch, report weekly to the marshal, and make no attempt to flee. If you do, you'll be arrested immediately and held without bail. Clear?" "Crystal clear, Your Honor." Elena could barely breathe. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet. If those witnesses don't materialize, or if their testimony doesn't support your version of events, these charges will proceed." The judge stood. "Marshal, take Hendricks into custody. I'll want depositions from everyone involved within the week." They took Thomas away, still raving about injustice and betrayal. Merrick slunk off looking like a whipped dog. The judge and marshal departed, leaving Iron Creek in a silence that felt like the aftermath of a storm. Elena sank into a chair, suddenly boneless with exhaustion and relief. Tommy climbed into her lap, and she held him tight, breathing in the reality of his presence. "Is it over?" he asked. "Not yet, sweetheart, but we're closer." She looked at Jonah, who stood by the window watching the smoldering remains of his barn. "I'm sorry about your horses, about all of this." "Horses can be replaced." He turned to face her. "You can't." The simple truth of it made Elena's eyes sting with tears. This man, who'd lost so much, who'd been so damaged by grief and injustice, was willing to lose more to protect her, to give her a chance at proving her innocence, to believe in her when almost no one else would. "Jonah," the sound of hoofbeats interrupted her. They all tensed, but it was Davis returning, his horse lathered with sweat. "I sent the wires," he said, swinging down from the saddle. "Got replies from 2 already. The store owner, Mrs. Patterson, she says she'll send a sworn statement by next week's post. And the sheriff, Dawes, he says he remembers you well, and he'll wire a full deposition to the territorial marshal within 3 days." Elena pressed her hand to her mouth, tears spilling over. "They remember. They're helping." "More than that," Davis grinned. "The telegraph operator knew about the fire in Harper's Ferry. Said the real story came out about 6 months after you left. The boarding house owner's son was caught trying to set another fire to collect insurance money. Confessed to the first one, too. Said he'd blamed you because you'd rejected him and he wanted revenge. He's in prison now, serving 20 years. The room spun. Elena gripped the table to keep from falling. "What?" "You were innocent all along, and now everyone knows it." Davis's grin widened. "The operator's wiring that information to the marshal today. Said it'll be in the official record by tomorrow." Jonah crossed the room in 3 strides and pulled Elena into his arms. She collapsed against him, sobbing with relief and exhaustion and the sudden, overwhelming knowledge that the nightmare was finally, truly over. "It's done," Jonah murmured into her hair. "You're free." Tommy wrapped his arms around both of them, and for a long moment they stood there in the warm kitchen, holding each other while the morning sun streamed through the windows and painted everything gold. The next few days passed in a blur of official visits, depositions, and statements. The marshal returned with news that the judge had dismissed all charges against Elena based on the evidence from Harper's Ferry. Thomas Hendricks was formally charged and held for trial. Samuel Merrick, facing community backlash for his role in the conspiracy, resigned from the bank and quietly left town. The ranch slowly returned to normal. They built a new barn, smaller than the old one, but solid. Davis and Miguel stayed on, proving their loyalty beyond question. Charlie's arm healed slowly, but he remained cheerful and helpful, teaching Tommy to read with increasing skill. And Elena cooked. She fed the crew and made the kitchen warm and filled the house with the smells of bread and coffee and life. One evening, about a month after Thomas's arrest, Elena stood on the porch watching the sunset paint the mountains purple and gold. Jonah came to stand beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched. "You could leave now, you know," he said quietly. "Charges are dropped. Your name is clear. You could go anywhere." "I know." Elena didn't look at him. "Is that what you want?" "No." The word was firm, certain. "But I won't trap you here out of obligation or gratitude. You've earned your freedom. You should have the choice of what to do with it." Elena turned to face him, studying the hard planes of his face, the silver threading through his beard, the pale eyes that had seen too much sorrow. "I choose to stay." "Elena, I'm not staying because I'm grateful, Jonah. I'm staying because this is home. Because Tommy's happy here. Because—" She took a breath, finding courage. "Because when I look at you, I see someone who understands what it's like to survive something that should have broken you. And I think maybe, together, we could do more than just survive. We could actually live." Jonah's hand came up to cup her face, his thumb brushing away a tear she hadn't realized had fallen. "I'm not easy to live with. I'm stubborn and hard, and I've forgotten how to be anything but alone." "Then we'll remember together," Elena smiled. "Besides, someone has to make sure you eat properly, and Tommy adores you. And this ranch needs a cook who actually knows what she's doing." "Is that all?" "No." She moved closer, her hand coming to rest over his heart. "I'm also falling in love with you, and I'd like to see where that goes." Jonah kissed her then, soft and careful, like she was something precious that might break. When they parted, he rested his forehead against hers. "I don't deserve you," he said. "Probably not, but you're stuck with me anyway." From inside the house, Tommy's voice called out, "Are you two going to kiss, or are we having dinner? Because I'm hungry." They both laughed, and Elena thought about how far they'd come. From desperate strangers to something like a family. It wasn't perfect. There were scars, both visible and hidden, but there was also hope and warmth and the promise of tomorrow. As autumn turned to winter, Elena Ward, no longer running, no longer afraid, finally came home. She stood at the kitchen window one snowy morning, watching Jonah teach Tommy to rope fence posts while the ranch dog barked encouragement. She'd made fresh bread, and the house smelled of yeast and warmth and belonging. This was what she'd been searching for all along. Not just safety, not just shelter, but a place where her past didn't define her, where Tommy could grow up loved and secure, where she could build a future instead of running from the past. Iron Creek Ranch had been the last place before nowhere. But it turned out nowhere was exactly where Elena needed to be, at the edge of the map, in the arms of a man who understood that the strongest love isn't the one that comes easily, but the one that's fought for, earned, and chosen every single day. That evening, as Elena served dinner to her family, because that's what they were now, chosen and true, she caught Jonah's eye across the table. He smiled, small and private, meant just for her. Tommy chattered about his day, his face bright and animated, so different from the hollow-eyed child who'd arrived at the ranch months ago. The road had been hard, the cost had been high, but looking at them now, her family, her home, her hard-won happiness, Elena knew with certainty that every step, every struggle, every moment of fear and doubt had led her exactly where she needed to be. Not to nowhere, to home. And she was never leaving again.